Have you ever found yourself in a conversation, desperately trying to get your point across, but no one's really hearing you? You talk, they nod, but the message is lost. It's frustrating, right? We all know what it feels like to struggle with communication, whether it's with colleagues, friends, or family. But what if I told you that the key to unlocking powerful, effective communication isn't about talking louder or using fancier words? It's about something far more practical, something that's rooted in a simple yet incredibly powerful philosophy. Enter pragmatism. It's a mindset that cuts through the noise, and it's the secret weapon to transforming the way you communicate. In this video, I'm going to show you how embracing pragmatic principles can revolutionize the way you interact with others, making your conversations not only more effective, but more meaningful. Stick around, because I'm diving deep into the art of effective communication. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. What you'll learn here today will change the way you speak and listen for good. Let's get into it. Number 1. Say less, get more. The power of strategic silence. We've all been there, stuck in a conversation where we feel like we have to keep talking, keep explaining, keep justifying ourselves. Maybe it's a meeting, a dinner with friends, or an argument with a partner. You know, the moments where you just feel like the more you say, the clearer your point will become. But here's the kicker. What if saying less actually gets you more? I know, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? You're probably thinking, wait, isn't communication about saying exactly what's on your mind? Well, yes and no. Let me break it down for you. Sometimes the most powerful tool in a conversation isn't your words, but your silence. Stick with me here. We've all been in situations where we've tried to fix things with words, whether it's explaining our point over and over or giving that one extra piece of information to make sure we're understood. But have you ever noticed that the more you talk, the less people actually listen? The more you try to convince, the more they resist. It's like talking becomes a wall, pushing people away instead of pulling them in. Now, here's the twist. The next time you're in one of those moments, whether you're in a debate, a meeting, or a simple conversation, try this. Say less. Hold back a bit. Let the silence hang in the air. Here's why. When you stop filling the space with words, you force people to actually think. They'll start wondering what you really mean. They'll reflect on your words, or lack thereof, and suddenly they're engaging on a deeper level. Silence isn't just empty, it's full of potential. I remember one time at work we were discussing a new project plan. I was at the table with my boss, a couple of co-workers and a few clients. Everyone was tossing out ideas, and I noticed that every time I added something to the conversation, the room would get quieter, and the clients' eyes would start glazing over. I could tell they weren't really listening, they were just waiting for their turn to speak. So, I decided to try something different. Instead of rushing to explain my point in detail, I simply paused. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. And then, one of the clients broke the silence and said, "Actually, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your take on this?" That moment was gold. Suddenly they were engaged, listening, and ready to hear what I had to say, on my terms. The power of silence isn't just about shutting up. It's about reclaiming control over the conversation. It's about owning your space, your ideas, and your presence without the need to fill every gap with words. You don't have to over-explain. You don't have to justify. You just have to trust that silence has its own way of speaking. This is where the real magic happens. The next time you're in a situation where you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause for a second. Take a deep breath, let the silence do its work, and watch how it shifts the energy. You'll feel more in control. People will start respecting your thoughts, not just the noise you make. Remember, saying less doesn't mean saying nothing. It means choosing your words wisely and letting silence amplify your message. It's not about being passive, it's about being present, in control, and fully aware of the space you occupy. So, here's the takeaway. Your words are powerful, but your silence can be even more powerful. Don't be afraid to let it speak for you. Your thoughts, your ideas, your presence, they deserve to be heard, and sometimes the best way to ensure that happens is to say less and let the silence do the heavy lifting. Number 2, disrupt the small talk. Bold conversations that cut through the noise. Small talk is a killer. Yeah, I said it. You know that conversation you have when you bump into someone at a party or in the office, the one where you talk about the weather or the latest Netflix series, or, let's be real, anything that doesn't really matter. You smile, nod, and mentally check out, hoping the conversation will somehow magically end. Sound familiar? Here's the thing, you don't have to settle for this meaningless chatter. What if I told you that you can disrupt the small talk and spark bold, real conversations that actually leave an impact? Now, I know what you're probably thinking, but wait, isn't small talk how we connect? Isn't it just part of being polite? Yes, I get it. Small talk is the social lubricant that keeps things comfortable and easy. But here's the catch. Comfort doesn't always lead to connection. If you're tired of feeling like you're just going through the motions with shallow conversations, trust me, you're not alone. We've all been there, standing in a room, surrounded by people, but somehow still feeling disconnected. You ask the usual questions like, "How's work going?" or "Been watching anything good lately?" You get the usual responses, and the conversation feels like a dead end. You're both stuck, waiting for someone to say something that doesn't just fill the silence, but actually sparks interest. I get it, small talk can feel like a necessary evil. But what if, instead of playing it safe, you could disrupt it completely and dive into something that's actually worth talking about? Here's the game changer. Stop asking the same boring questions and start asking bold ones. Go beyond the surface. Instead of the usual, "What do you do for a living?" try something like, "What's the one thing in your career that excites you right now?" Instead of asking, "How was your weekend?" ask, "What's the most unexpected thing that happened to you this week?" It sounds risky, right? But hear me out. People are craving depth. They're tired of the same old questions and one-dimensional conversations. When you throw out a bold question, you're inviting them to step out of the usual script and engage with you on a different level. Let me tell you about a time I put this into practice. I was at a networking event, surrounded by professionals doing the usual small talk dance. Everyone was asking the standard questions. "So what do you do?" and "How's business?" It was polite, but it was also painfully predictable. So I decided to change the energy. When I met someone new, instead of the standard "What do you do?" I asked, "What's something in your career that made you feel like you were actually making a difference?" The person paused for a second, looked at me, and then lit up. They told me about a project that had completely shifted the way they thought about their work, and we dove deep into the conversation. It was engaging, it was authentic, and most importantly, it was memorable. By asking one bold question, I disrupted the cycle of small talk and created a conversation that was not just pleasant, but actually meaningful. So here's the thing. Bold conversations aren't about being confrontational or invasive. They're about taking a risk and inviting others to do the same. It's about breaking the rules of typical interaction and daring to ask questions that matter. By doing this, you're not only showing interest, you're showing courage. You're showing that you value depth over convenience. And when you start having these kinds of conversations, you'll realize how much more fulfilling they are. You're not just filling time, you're making connections that actually stick. This is about reclaiming your social power, You don't have to settle for surface-level conversations just because it's easy. You have the ability to spark something deeper, something more meaningful. So the next time you're in a room full of small talk, go ahead and disrupt the noise. Ask the bold question. Invite someone to share their thoughts, their story, their passion. You'll be surprised at how quickly it can shift the entire energy of the conversation. Remember, your words have weight, and by disrupting the small talk, you're showing up with strength, curiosity, and respect for yourself and the person you're talking to. So take that step. Ask the question that cuts through the noise. It's time to move beyond the pleasantries and create connections that actually matter. Number 3, leverage conflict. Turning disagreement into an opportunity. What if I told you that conflict isn't your enemy? I know, it sounds a little crazy, but stay with me for a second. Conflict is usually seen as something to avoid, something that brings stress, tension, and bad vibes. But what if instead of running from it, we actually leaned into it? Yes, trust me on this. Disagreements can be the secret to better communication, stronger relationships, and even personal growth. It's all about how you approach it. You've been there, right? You're in a meeting, a conversation, or even a casual chat, and suddenly, boom, a disagreement. It could be over something small, or it could be something that really gets under your skin. Maybe it's a family member, a coworker, or even a friend. You feel the heat rise, your pulse quicken, and you instinctively want to defend your point or back away from the tension. You know that feeling. It's uncomfortable. But here's the thing. That discomfort can actually be a golden opportunity if you know how to handle it. Now, here's the twist. Instead of viewing the disagreement as a fight you need to win or an awkward situation to escape, think of it as a doorway. A doorway that leads to deeper understanding, better solutions, and even stronger connections. I know this might sound counterintuitive. Most of us are taught to avoid conflict, keep things smooth, and play nice. But imagine this. Every time you face a disagreement, you have a chance to learn something new, both about the other person and about yourself. Let me give you a real-life example. A few months ago, I was in a team meeting at work. We were discussing a big project, and my idea didn't exactly sit well with one of my colleagues. She disagreed, and honestly, it got a little heated. Normally, I would have gotten defensive and tried to convince her that my idea was the best. But instead, I paused. I took a deep breath, and I asked, "Can you help me understand why you feel that way?" That simple question shifted the whole dynamic. Suddenly, we were both digging into the problem, exploring each other's perspectives, and, surprise, coming up with a solution that was better than either of our original ideas. Instead of letting the conflict pull us apart, it actually brought us closer together, and the project turned out better because of it. So, what's the secret to turning conflict into an opportunity? It's about curiosity. It's about shifting your mindset from "I need to win" to "I want to understand." Conflict doesn't have to be destructive. It can be a chance to challenge your assumptions, clarify your values, and discover new ideas. It's not about being right, it's about finding the best path forward. By approaching conflict with curiosity and openness, you invite real, honest conversations that can lead to breakthroughs. And here's the real power of it all. When you start using conflict as a tool for growth, you take control of the situation. You stop being a passive participant, avoiding the discomfort, and start becoming an active problem solver. You no longer feel like you're walking on eggshells in conversations. Instead, you stand firm, knowing that every disagreement is an opportunity to learn, to connect, and to strengthen your relationships. This is about reclaiming your peace and your power. It's about refusing to let discomfort control you. The next time you face a disagreement, remember that it doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. It can be the beginning of something better, better understanding, better communication, and better solutions. So, next time you're in the middle of a conflict, take a moment. Don't back down. Don't shy away. Ask the right questions. Lean in. Turn that disagreement into a chance to grow and watch how it transforms not just the conversation, but you too. Embrace conflict as an opportunity and watch your relationships and your problem-solving skills soar. Number 4, the reverse persuasion technique, convincing by letting them convince you. Imagine this. You're in a conversation and you're trying to persuade someone to see things your way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Instead of pushing your point, instead of selling your ideas with all the energy you can muster, you let them convince you. Yes, you heard that right. You reverse the roles. Instead of trying to make them believe you, you create an environment where they're the ones who feel compelled to convince themselves. Sound counterintuitive? Trust me, it works. And here's why. Now, you might be thinking, isn't persuasion all about making your point stronger and more convincing? Absolutely. But what if I told you that by giving the other person the space to make their own arguments, you actually gain more influence? It's a tactic that's subtle, but incredibly effective. Instead of going head-to-head and trying to win them over with your logic, you let them do the work. This shifts the power dynamic, makes them more invested, and, most importantly, creates a sense of ownership over the decision. It's almost like tricking their brain into thinking they've come up with the idea themselves. And who doesn't trust their own ideas? We've all been in situations where we've tried to persuade someone, whether it's in a meeting, a personal conversation, or even a negotiation. You know the type, the conversation where you're speaking passionately, presenting all your facts, and still there's that stubborn resistance from the other side. You feel like you're talking to a brick wall, and no matter what you say, they're just not buying it. I've been there. It's frustrating, isn't it? You want to be heard, you want to make your point, but the harder you push, the more they push back. But what if you simply stopped pushing? Let me tell you about a time when I used this exact technique. I was negotiating a project deadline with a client who was insisting on a much earlier date than I knew was realistic. I could have gone into a long spiel about why the timeline was too tight, why it wouldn't work, why they were wrong. Instead, I took a different approach. I calmly said, "I can see why you'd want it sooner, and I completely understand your urgency. What do you think would be a reasonable way to meet the deadline while ensuring the quality stays high?" In that moment, I stepped back and let them think through the logistics. Slowly but surely, they started proposing adjustments to the deadline themselves. By the end of the conversation, they were the ones suggesting a timeline that worked for both of us, and they felt empowered by it. I hadn't won the argument, they had, but the deal was exactly what I wanted all along. Here's the magic of this technique. When you let someone convince themselves, they feel more in control. They don't feel pressured or manipulated. Instead, they come to their own conclusions, which feels far more authentic to them. It's a brilliant psychological trick that taps into the principle of ownership. People are far more likely to stand by a decision they feel they've made themselves, rather than one you've made for them. So how does this benefit you emotionally? It's a game changer when it comes to avoiding frustration. You stop feeling like you're swimming upstream, trying to convince someone who's dug in their heels. Instead, you're creating a space for them to think through their own objections, reconsider their stance, and ultimately come to the conclusion you were hoping for, all without you having to do the heavy lifting. It's about finding the power in not forcing the issue. It's about patience and trust, and knowing that you don't always have to be the one pushing for change. By implementing this technique, you reclaim your peace. You stop feeling like you're fighting against resistance. You can relax, Knowing that the conversation is no longer a battle of wills. It's a collaborative process where both sides feel heard and the outcome feels like a mutual agreement. Next time you're in a situation where you want to persuade someone, try letting them do the convincing. Step back, ask open-ended questions, give them the space to come to their own conclusions. It might just be the most powerful move you can make. When you let them convince themselves, you're not just being smart, you're showing strength, confidence, and a deep respect for their autonomy. And in the end, you'll get exactly what you wanted without ever feeling like you had to fight for it. Number 5. Brutal transparency, the art of radical honesty in communication. You know how we've all been in those awkward situations where we tiptoe around the truth, trying not to upset anyone, only to end up making everything more complicated. Or worse, we tell half-truths, hoping the person doesn't catch on, but they do, and it makes everything worse. What if I told you that the key to building stronger, more authentic relationships, whether at work, with family or friends, lies in embracing brutal transparency? Yes, radical honesty. It might sound like a recipe for disaster, but hear me out. Now, I know what you're thinking. But won't that just make me come across as rude or harsh? Who wants to hear the unfiltered truth all the time? Trust me, I've been there. The fear of hurting someone's feelings or making things awkward can be paralyzing. But here's the thing. While sugarcoating things might seem like the safer option in the moment, it rarely leads to real connection or understanding. Radical honesty might be uncomfortable at first, but it creates an open space where trust can thrive, and people can truly see each other for who they are. We've all been in those moments where someone asks for feedback, and you know they're expecting a compliment, but you're dying to be honest. "Hey, how's my presentation?" they ask, and you want to say, "Honestly, it was kind of all over the place." Instead, you might say something like, "It was good, but maybe next time try focusing a bit more on the main points." You know the type, the soft feedback that doesn't really get to the heart of the issue. It feels like a compromise, doesn't it? It's a way of keeping the peace, but deep down, you know they're not going to grow from that. And that's exactly where radical honesty comes in. Let's break it down. Brutal transparency is not about being mean or tactless. It's about being real. It's about cutting through the fluff and offering feedback that's direct, but done with respect and care. The key is timing and delivery. There's a difference between saying something for the sake of being brutal and saying it because it's necessary for growth. I remember a time at work when a colleague asked me for honest feedback on a project. The usual response in a situation like that would be to pad the truth with softeners. But this time, I decided to be upfront. I told him, "Honestly, I think you missed some key points that could really elevate this. You're so close, but you need to focus more on the details." At first, there was this brief, tense silence, but then he nodded. "I needed to hear that," he said. The next day, he came back with a much stronger version of the project, more refined and detailed. That's the beauty of radical honesty. It opens the door for true improvement. When you're transparent, people can trust that you're not just trying to protect their feelings, you're helping them level up. But here's the real power of brutal transparency. It's about reclaiming your space and peace. How often do we hold back the truth because we're worried about being liked or keeping the peace? And how often does that leave us frustrated or resentful because we didn't speak our minds? When you embrace radical honesty, you're freeing yourself from the burden of saying things you don't mean, and you're allowing others the same freedom. It's empowering, not just for you, but for everyone involved. No more second-guessing or overanalyzing your words. No more holding back. Just pure, honest communication. Here's the thing. Being radically honest isn't about hurting people. It's about being real and helping them grow. It's about choosing courage over comfort, truth over silence. The next time you're faced with a conversation where you want to hold back, ask yourself, what if this honesty is exactly what they need to hear? You don't have to be harsh, but you do need to be clear. Speak your truth, even if it's uncomfortable, because that's where the magic happens. Your peace, your power, and your authenticity live in that space of brutal transparency. So go ahead, embrace it. Speak up. The truth might be uncomfortable, but the trust it builds is worth it. Number 6, challenge assumptions. Asking the questions. No one else will ask. You've probably been in a room full of people nodding along to something that doesn't sit right with you. Maybe it's a meeting where everyone's agreeing on the same solution, and you're thinking, wait a minute, isn't there a better way? Or perhaps it's a casual conversation and something feels off, but no one wants to challenge the status quo. Here's the thing, when everyone else is comfortable with the obvious answer, it's your chance to ask the question no one else will. Yes, that uncomfortable, sometimes awkward question that might just change everything. Trust me on this. Challenging assumptions is a superpower you didn't know you had. Now, I know what you're thinking, but if I ask that question, people might think I'm out of line. Or, what if it makes things awkward? We've all been there, second-guessing whether speaking up will ruffle feathers or make us look like we don't know what we're talking about. But here's the truth. Asking the questions that no one else will ask is exactly what sparks change and innovation. It's how we grow, both as individuals and as a society. The most groundbreaking ideas in history came from people who dared to ask, what if everything we've been told is wrong? We've all been in that situation, when something feels off but everyone else is too polite or too afraid to rock the boat. Maybe it's at work, where your team is convinced that the latest idea will solve all the problems, but you have a gut feeling that it's missing something. Or at a family dinner, when everyone's talking about the same old traditions, and you're thinking, why are we still doing this? That's when you need to ask the question no one wants to ask. Why? Because it's not about being difficult or contrarian. It's about uncovering the truths that others might have missed and finding a better way forward. I'll be honest. I used to be the person who avoided asking those tough questions. It was easier to stay quiet, to blend in, and just let the conversation flow. But I remember a time when I was working on a team project, and everyone kept agreeing that our plan was flawless. But something didn't sit right with me. I had this nagging feeling that we were missing a huge part of the puzzle, but I didn't want to disrupt the flow. Then I finally spoke up, asking, what if the way we're approaching this isn't the most effective? What if we're overlooking something important? It felt like a risky move. There were a couple of raised eyebrows, a few awkward silences, but that question led to a complete rethink of our strategy. We ended up discovering a much more efficient solution. Here's the magic in challenging assumptions. It's not just about questioning things for the sake of it. It's about taking ownership of your thoughts and perspectives, refusing to let the obvious answers define your decisions. When you ask those uncomfortable questions, you're doing more than just stirring the pot. You're reclaiming your space in a conversation, and you're offering a chance for everyone to rethink their own positions. It's about bringing new insights to the table, and it's empowering for you and everyone else involved. The beauty of asking questions others won't is that you start to see things differently. You challenge your own thinking, and you encourage others to do the same. It's an act of confidence. It's you saying, I'm not afraid to ask, to learn, to grow. And when you do that, you not only help others, but you also grow into someone who is truly in control of their own mind. So, the next time you find yourself in a room full of people all nodding along to something that doesn't sit right with you, ask yourself, what's the one question no one is asking? And then ask it. Your space, your voice, your perspective, it all matters. Don't let assumptions stand in the way of your growth. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found this video insightful and that the tips shared on pragmatism and effective communication will help you in your everyday interactions. If you found this valuable, please give it a like. It really helps out the channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on more content like this. And if you know someone who could benefit from a more practical approach to communication, share this video with them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts or any personal experiences you've had with communication challenges. Drop a comment below and let's keep this conversation going. Remember, communication isn't just about what you say, but how you make others feel heard and understood. Until next time, keep speaking with purpose and listening with intention. You've got this.